So imagine this. You're in bed. Dogs, comfortable blanket, a nice peaceful evening, just got done streaming, losing face at games. You have your phone in hand. You're lightly toasted. You're watching 4-hour Minecraft YouTube videos to slowly fall asleep to. And then out of nowhere, your brother kicks in your door and says, "Hey, did you hear the news? Jame has been benched on Virtus Pro." You look at him, aghast, shocked at this news. You do a kip up into a front flip with a twist out of your bed, knowing that your duty is upon you. You must relay the news to the masses. And that's what I'm here to do. We're here to talk about the very uncertain future of Virtus Pro and what's next for the save god himself as Jame finds himself out of a job, even though the Perfect World Major hasn't even finished yet. So you guys know what to do. Take a second, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It helps out immensely the YouTube algorithm, and thank you for doing it. Speaking of that major, tomorrow night I will be live co-streaming the start of the playoffs. Come drop a follow at twitch.tv/LionHeartZ2 and come watch the major with me. Without any further ado, let's talk about this insanity. Okay, let's get the nuts and bolts of this out of the way. About an hour ago, when I'm recording this, it's actually literally almost 1 AM right now when I'm saying this, Virtus Pro tweeted out that the captain of the Virtus Pro CS2 roster, Jame, has been benched, with a note from their CEO ending with the fact that it is now time for change within the organization, alongside Jame's heartfelt gratitudes to the fans. We then hop over to the HLTV news article, also linked in the description, where we get further insights from that same CEO saying that changes were inevitable after their recent failures at the Perfect World Major, saying, and I quote, "The discussions were long, comprehensive, and very difficult. Ultimately, together with the players and coach, we concluded that at this stage, Jame would not be able to combine the two key roles in the roster, IGL and AWP, and that the best solution would be to bench him and calmly consider all available options for both the good of our team and Jame's personal prospects." And so, going forward at this stage, Jame has not been replaced. There is no other player joining Virtus Pro. Right now, he is simply off the active roster. And getting straight into my thoughts, I think we all knew that there was going to be massive change for Virtus Pro. They've been one of the most disappointing teams throughout the entire year. I have covered quite vitriolically and very emphatically my issues with this roster every step of the way, as they have continued to disappoint me time and time and again. The sign of Electronic did nothing. In fact, it actually made the team worse. And instead of being what should have been the strongest team out of Russia this entire year, they've spent the back part of the season in routine mediocrity. So change, like the CEO said, was certainly inevitable. However, I did not expect Jame to be the first person or even at all on the chopping block. And it leaves me with far more questions and far more concerns than pretty much any other move this team could have made. Because as we all know, the two hardest roles to replace in any Counter-Strike team is the in-game leader and the AWPer. And Jame does both. So you're benching one player and now need to fulfill both of his roles in whatever new roster you field. This is of course the same dilemma Liquid recently had with benching Cadian. So are you going to go the Liquid route? Are you going to simply seek out another AWPer and then shift to somebody else being the in-game leader? In which case, if it's Electronic, I got bad news, you guys are cooked. If not, then clearly Virtus Pro needs to consider cutting somebody else and then finding a suitable in-game leader and AWP replacement. And that's why this is going to be so difficult, because like it or not, as much as I've been critical of him, how are you going to find an AWPer that is better than Jame and available on the market? Someone like Shiro is locked up in Team Spirit, you're not going to get him. Are you going to get Munacy from G2? Do you have that kind of money? You still need an in-game leader afterwards if you did. After that, who else are you going to look to? Maybe an Icy from Cloud9. Young, unproven, questionable if he's going to be better than Jame. It's going to be very difficult to fit this man's shoes. And even if you do, where is the in-game leadership going to come from? It can't be Jame. You need him to just be an AWPer. It can't be Electronic. He doesn't know what he's doing. Is Norbert going to become an in-game leader? And your other players like Fame and Flit are young and don't seem qualified to do it at all. Now, all of that being said, I don't think this is an impossible task. Let's take this one at a time. If I was going to approach getting a new in-game leader for Virtus Pro, the first place I'm going is Bubblesj from Cloud9. Now, I've been talking a lot both on stream and in recent videos how I think Bubblesj could go to Team Spirit and takes Chopper's spot. That's because if you're looking for a Russian-speaking IGL who's young, on the market and not a terrible individual player, I don't see anyone who could be better than Bubblesj. He's on a team that right now isn't looking like it's going to be winning tournaments or contending anytime soon, despite my better hopes. So he's in a position where, buyout forgiving, you should be able to get him at a reasonable price. His stock is also trending upward. He had a recent good run with Cloud9 through the major cycle, and while Cloud9 certainly had its own set of issues like its T-sides, Bubblesj still shined in many spots both as a leader, and he had great impact as an individual, especially for what you're expecting out of an in-game leader. So he does seem like the most attractive first option. Next, I do think Chopper would be someone you could consider, especially if he gets benched by Team Spirit, which I certainly think is highly likely, mostly because I want them to get Bubblesj as well, so whoever gets there first, I guess, gets the boom. But regardless, if Chopper were to end up on the open market, then yeah, I would bring him into a team like this. As much as I have many misgivings about him as a leader and an individual, he's still an in-game leader with Tier 1 experience, competed in and won some of the biggest tournaments this year. You could bring him in, and I would like to see what he could do with Electronic. I think there's a lot of potential where that could work out, and if Chopper comes in, say for like a Norbert, why can't we then also say Jame could come back onto the active roster as an opper? Same thing with Bubblesj. If you can bring back Jame as your main opper, that's ideal. He's still good enough to be a top 10 opper in the world. He shows great form routinely. The major where he failed to qualify was his best individual tournament, I think, all year. Really, what I'm getting at is that the IGL option is the best option for Virtus Pro. You want to keep Jame in Electronic because despite all of the issues with them, they're still two superstars, and I think Electronic could have a bounce back in 2025. Jame is more than game enough to be an individual, and I think not focusing on calling, maybe at most being a secondary caller, would allow him to even better focus on his individuals. At that point, we could actually see Virtus Pro try and deliver on some of the firepower that you see latent within this roster. But if we have to go through the route of replacing Jame as well, you need an opper. What are your best options? Well, obviously, we know that G2 are imploding after this major as well. Bubblesj is both Russian and an opper, turns out, so that would be a great pickup. Can you pay the $1 billion for his buyout? Well, Virtus Pro, I don't know. That's kind of on you guys. The thing is, VP would have to swing pretty early. We know Bubblesj is going to be a valuable commodity if G2 are looking to move on with him. Regardless, a lot of teams are going to be asking what his plans are, seeing how his team is about to disintegrate before his very eyes. Especially if they do well at the major, Bubblesj is going to be a top prospect. Past that, it's probably going to be pretty hard to get Shiro out of Spirit, so the only other, Russian opera that's even, on my radar is Icy from Cloud9, so I guess you could try and, make some deal there where it's Bubblesj, Icy for Jame and money and some kind of cash transfer situation, but I have no idea how something like that would work. Kind of just comes back to the broader point that finding someone for Jame is going to be pretty difficult. So the best case I would hope is that Virtus Pro finds a way to work it out and Jame comes back into the roster. If that weren't the case, where could Jame potentially go in free agency? Well, I am assuming that he would want to stay with Russian-speaking lineups, so obviously his big options would be Spirit or Cloud9, which would certainly be interesting. It depends on how married C9 is to seeing how Icy develops as a young prospect. If C9 wants to shift into a more win-now mode, then yeah, Jame could make a lot of sense in a secondary caller and main opping role next to Bubblesj. That's why I made the suggestion the other way. As far as Spirit goes, I just don't see it happening. I think Shiro is better than Jame, just straight up. That's about all I have to say. I was tempted to just make this video about me just laughing at Virtus Pro's self-destruction, but I do think Jame is a valuable piece, and I want to see Virtus Pro succeed going into next year. I think that some kind of change is the correct step forward, but I do think most of us are shocked to see Jame be the first guy on the chopping block. Whether that's permanent or just a temporary shift, we'll have to see. I'm going to go ahead and leave it to you guys here. Do you want Jame to go elsewhere? What's your ideal Virtus Pro rebuild? Let me know in those comments down below, and I'll be down there reading them. Just wanted to go ahead and pump out this news video for you. Again, 1 a.m. I'm going to go to bed. Shout out to my channel members, Justin, Jesse, Furley, Bubblesj, Milan Berta, and Dr. Cocktor. If you want to become a channel member, you can do so at the link in the description down below. Come follow me on twitch.tv/LionHeartZ. I'll be co-streaming the major tomorrow night. It'll be fun. I'll see you guys there. Hopefully Spirit wins over G2 in the finals. Donk, major MVP. All right, later.